Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar, Personalized CVs for Applications in Germany. Before we head on and start with today's topics, I'd like to introduce you to the TUM Career Service. So you can find our contact details here at the top of the slide. And yeah, feel free to contact us at any time with your career queries. It is our job to help you in your career development and in the search for your dream job. To help you with that, we offer a lot of different formats. For instance, our career events, such as this webinar, but we do have plenty more. So do keep an eye on our website, or alternatively subscribe to our career newsletter so that you always know what's happening, especially the big events like the career days and others. Once you've updated your CV, maybe after this webinar, you can upload it to our online CV check. It's an offer that we have where you upload your documents and we then send you some feedback on your materials and what we think about them. You can also schedule individual career counseling sessions with our career advisors to discuss your personal career matters. And what else? Yeah, we have a comprehensive website with lots of information material for you to download. We run a job and internship portal. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have newsletters that you can subscribe to stay up to date with our office and services, and also receive tips and tricks for your job hunt. This is the agenda for this webinar. So I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking to you about resources for job hunting, so places where you can actually find interesting vacancies. And then we'll look at the CV in detail, the basis of your application. We'll look at structure, content. I'll also mention a lot of country-specific aspects as we go along. I'm sure you're all aware that application documents differ from culture to culture, from country to country. So I'll be focusing today on application documents in Germany. So if you're wanting to apply elsewhere, please research the country-specific aspects of the culture you're targeting. And then we'll also talk about how to personalize your document, how to make your CV stand out from the crowd, and to really reflect your personal candidate profile. So let's jump right into it. I think when you start your job hunt in Germany, when you start researching jobs, I think it does make a lot of sense to also research the job market a little bit. And a great place to start is always the websites of the companies in your industry, in your field that you're already familiar with. I'm sure most of you know like the top 3 to 5 companies in your field. So I would suggest looking at their websites, specifically at their career websites, to figure out how these companies represent themselves, what they're saying about the candidates they're looking for, the kind of skills they're after, the kind of experience they require, especially for graduate positions, whether you can do maybe study projects with them or thesis projects, and so on and so forth. And then you can also go from there and do a bit more research as to these companies' partners in academia and industry, these companies' suppliers, customers, and also competitors. And hopefully that will help you gain a good overview of the job market in your industry, but also your target country, your target culture, maybe even your target city, depending on where you're planning to apply. as I'm sure you're aware, Germany is a country of organizations, of clubs, of Vereine. So of course we do have an industry organization for pretty much every single industry out there, no matter how small, no matter how niche. There is one there. I've just listed a few here in addition to the website of the Chambers of Commerce, which have a list of member companies in Bavaria. So I think these websites in general are a good place to go to learn about the latest industry news, to maybe subscribe to newsletters, and a lot of them also have, you know, either lists of member companies or their own job portals with industry-specific positions. Online job boards, I believe, are the biggest resource for finding jobs in this country. I think a very good place to start is the TUM job and internship portal, which I've mentioned previously, because this is a place where employers specifically advertise jobs when they're looking to recruit someone from TUM. Then there's more general job boards. I'm sure you've heard of most of them: Monster, Stepstone, Expedia, and so on and so forth. These are always great places to start your job search. But then there's also more industry-specific boards, and it really pays off to figure out which ones are the most important, the most relevant for your degree, for your target industry. Yeah. I've listed a few, but these are only examples. So make sure that maybe you talk to your peers, to your tutors, to your professors to figure out which ones are the big ones for your industry. Meta search engines are search engines that don't tend to look very pretty, but they can be very efficient in that they work like search engines. So they search through other job portals, through very local websites, regional websites, to find positions that might not be advertised on the big platforms. Job hunting or recruitment processes, placing adverts is extremely expensive for companies. So oftentimes they will try and place their adverts on a lot of different smaller, less pricey websites before advertising with the really big players. So these meta search engines can be extremely efficient in finding jobs according to your keyword search. And then I believe that as international students, you always have advantages over your German peers, such as, a lot of the time, language skills, cultural knowledge. So I think it does make sense to target specifically institutions that work on international relations, the Goethe-Zentrum, for instance, the La Maison de France, the British Council, or whatever is the equivalent of your country, of your home country. Lots of expat portals, Internations in Munich, for instance. A lot of those have information on job hunting in the two countries, and occasionally they have job portals as well, where people with a specific skill set, knowledge of two countries, two cultures are recruited. And then, of course, it's the 21st century, so a lot of job hunting happens via apps nowadays as well. I've included two of them here on the slide, one more local, one rather international. More resources. So in Germany, a very important, although not always popular, institution is the Employment Center. They have a pretty terrible website that I find extremely difficult to navigate. But if you do decide to spend a little bit of time there, they have a lot of really good and useful resources for academics as well, for graduates, for university graduates, and they have a very big job portal as well, where I think it pays off to do a bit of a search and regularly to see if they advertise positions that are of interest to you. Believe it or not, advertising job ads in newspapers is still a very popular thing to do for companies in Germany, specifically for positions that require a very specialized skill set, or for very senior positions, or for very prestigious positions or institutions. So you can find those newspapers in the TUM libraries, and I would just have a quick chat with the librarian to maybe figure out what day of the week the classified ads, the job ads come out. Then you can browse those as well. There are plenty of industry journals, industry-specific newsletters or publications for pretty much every industry out there. Again, I do believe that it makes sense to figure out the big ones, the important ones for your industry, and you don't even have to subscribe to them. Although it does make sense to flick through them or to visit their websites online just to stay on top of industry trends, to be aware of what is happening in your industries, not only because it might have interest to yourself, hopefully, what's happening, but also because you might get asked about just industry happenings in your interviews as well. So and a lot of those have job sections too. There is subscription services out there, such as the Vila Arbeitsmarkt, which do these kind of, it's almost like brochures or magazines with hundreds of job ads every week on the 3 industries listed here on the slide, and I think they do a really great job. And they have a newsletter that's for free with a couple of jobs every week also. Business networks online, I'm sure you're familiar with those. LinkedIn is a popular one in Germany. It's mostly English speaking, whereas Xing is a very popular one for the DACH region, and that's mostly the German speaking world. I'm happy for you to use those. We don't recommend or disrecommend it, but make sure that if you do have a profile online, that it is up to date and it is filled in properly so that recruiters can actually find you. If you're interested, we tend to have webinars on using social media to build networks and to job hunt. So have a look at our events page if you're interested in this kind of job hunting. Obviously, there's career fairs, recruiting days, a lot of them happening online or offline. A big one at TUM is the Ecom. They're a student-run organization who organize some of the biggest career fairs in the south of Germany. These are a great place to meet with recruiters, get an application photograph taken, network, or recruiting days. If you're interested in a specific company, you might like to subscribe to their career newsletters or check their events page regularly to see if they have an open day, a recruiting day, or something like that coming up. And finally, of course, there's a range of recruitment agencies that you can use. I think these are oftentimes great people to work with because they tend to know the job market, especially your local job market, extremely well. I've listed a few here. Brunel is more for engineers, Tech Connect also, but also for IT. Sinus, for instance, is one for the life sciences. But there's hundreds and hundreds out there. So if you're interested in working with a recruitment agency, you might like to check those out. So those were a lot of resources, different ways of learning about job markets and finding vacancies. So those should give you a good starting place, or lots of interesting resources to use to hopefully find exciting internships and jobs. So enough of that. Let's move on to application documents. So I think before we start thinking about the CV specifically, I think it's important to remember why we actually write application documents at all. We do so because we want to introduce ourselves to prospective employers. And we don't only want to introduce ourselves, but we also want to convince those readers, those employers, of our expertise. And we want to convince them that we are a better, more qualified candidate than everyone else, including, by the way, all of the other people studying with us at TUM. So I think it does help to really think about the question what an employer actually needs to know about you in order to determine whether you can do the job or not. So first of all, they will want to know what your skills and your knowledge are. They will want to have an overview of your experience and your career to date. So that is what the CV is for, and that is what we will be speaking about today. They will also not only want to know what your qualifications are, but whether your profile matches the job requirements. So they want to know about the highlights of your career to date. They will want to know about your key skills, and they want to know why you're applying for this job, why you want to do it. That is what the cover letter is for, which, by the way, is a mandatory part of a German application. So if this is a document that you're not familiar with, we offer webinars on this topic as well, and I highly recommend that you attend one of those sessions to learn how to make the most of that document also. They will want to know what your personality is like, how you deal with tasks, with problems, with people. So eventually they'll want to know if you're, in addition to your qualification, if you're able to cope with the specific challenges of the job, whether you fit into the company and in the team. And that's what they'll try and figure out in an interview. Which means that in Germany, when we apply for jobs, even if it's just a Hiwi job, some smaller position, a mini job, applicants tend to send an entire application portfolio, and I highly recommend that this is what you do. Otherwise, your application will not be viewed as complete and dismissed. So in Germany, an application portfolio comprises of a cover letter, a CV with a professional application photograph, and copies of your certificates. There's things that you can do optionally, like design a cover page, or if you've done a lot of academic work, if you've done a lot of publications, then you would attach a bibliography. By the way, if you are currently thinking about doing a PhD, enrolled in a PhD, doing a postdoc or something like that, we offer webinars specifically for people like on cover, on CV writing specifically for postgraduate students and doctoral students. So I would recommend that you attend one of those as well. So then this application portfolio, as I said, comprises lots of different documents. So in the olden days, we would send these through the post, and we would buy these very pretty application folders that you can, to this day, still get in any drugstore. So if for whatever random reason your employer requires you to send your application through the post, then please go and buy one of those, and make sure that you include your application in the order listed on the slide. The same, by the way, goes for, or the same order at least goes for email applications. So always only attach one single attachment, one single document. The cover letter is always the first part or the first document within this attachment, followed by the CV, and then any other attachments and certificate copies. So as we said earlier, the CV basically gives an overview of your career. It should be very quickly grasped, which is why I suggest that you adhere to a strict structure. You should never extend a 2-page limit. So you don't have a lot of space for your CV. And nowadays, information is presented in a CV in reverse chronological order, which means that we put the most up-to-date, the most recent information on the top, and on the top of the page, and then you go down the page as you go back in time. And I strongly suggest that when it comes to the layout, that you don't use any templates, you create your own document. I suggest that you look at a lot of different examples online, get inspired by what's out there, and then just use your own brain to figure out what makes sense for you and create a very consistent timeline and layout. So you can use all the colors and fonts and types of highlights you like. I recommend that you keep it on the minimal side, just to make things look very professional and for the layout to actually support your information rather than distract from it. This is an example I'd like you to look at for a minute, and I don't want you to necessarily read through all the details here, but instead focus on how this person used colors, the timeline, and headlines to create structure within the document and to help the reader navigate the page. So I think for me as a reader, I really like this example because it's very easy for me to find relevant details and to see what information can be found where. As you can see on this example as well, what is quite important on application documents is always that I have your contact details. So I think your name should obviously be on the document. And then in German, it is common, it is a standard to include your full postal address, as well as a phone number and an email address. Please always only include the phone number under which I can actually reach you personally, not your parents back home in India, and also only just one email address. Just one email address that is clear, without a lot of numbers and not extremely long, just professional looking, one single email address. Because this is a thing that's quite specific to Germany, I just want to talk about the photograph for a second. Now, including a photograph and a lot of personal details is not mandatory in Germany, but because a lot of people do it, it's kind of expected. And we recommend that you go and have one professional photograph taken. And there's a lot of events and career fairs at TUM where usually there's free application photo shoots somewhere in the program of the day, so you can go and have your photo taken there, or alternatively pretty much any photo studio in town will offer these types of photo shoots as well. It doesn't have to be a super conservative picture, but depending on the industry, it should definitely look professional, and you can obviously use this for your online business platforms as well. So we talked a little bit about the structure of the CV, but what about content? What do you actually put on the CV? So I talked a little bit about the header. Make sure that there's contact information there, that I can reach you both by email and by phone. But then everything that comes after that or below that is pretty much up to you. And this is where I really encourage you to do some thinking and not just to copy a template that you found online. Everyone's career path, career to date is different. So even if you study mechanical engineering at TUM and you're surrounded by 1,000 people who study exactly the same, all 1,000 of you should have a CV that looks different, because your lives are different, because you are different, you have different interests, different focuses in your study program, you're doing different internships. So a template can be a good inspiration. And again, I encourage you to look at as many of them as possible, creative ones, conservative ones, colorful ones, black and white ones, but then you need to decide what makes sense for you, what makes sense for your life, and what represents and highlights your profile in the best way. So I've included a lot of examples for headlines on the slide, but again, it is important that you think about, okay, did I actually do a military or civil service? Do I need a section on that? Can I just include this into the work experience section, or even maybe the education section? So there is no right or wrong here. You need to, you're the boss of your own life. You're the marketing manager here. So you can and should make those decisions. Here's another example, because I believe that no matter what you put on your CV, I think that you should always focus on the reader, and you should always keep those people who are reading this, the HR people, maybe a future supervisor or boss or some colleagues in mind, who will have to interpret the details presented by you on your CV. So if you think, I'm in this student here, I'm enrolled in a very interdisciplinary, a very unique or novel program, I should probably include some additional details on what this is actually about, who it's for, what we're learning, then by all means do so. This person also did this with their higher education examination, and also with some of the voluntary activities, explaining what those groups they were involved in were about. You can obviously do the same with for instance, the companies or institutions that you worked for, or any other place where you feel, I want to give the reader a little bit more info and detail so they can really understand who I am, what I'm qualified to do. I would like to give you a minute to look at this example. I copied this of a CV that I once received in a check, on a CV check. And because I'm used to looking at CVs, I think I can interpret it okay. I can probably gain from this that this person was enrolled in a double degree program. But as you can see here, there's a few issues with this, mainly that the timeline is in the middle of these paragraphs, so you're losing a lot of space, and also there's a lot of abbreviations that the reader might not be familiar with. Maybe even you who are all at TUM might not really understand. So imagine what that must be like for someone outside of TUM who doesn't know the university or the specific program. And then I have absolutely no idea what this person actually is interested in, what their focus areas are, maybe what kind of projects they've done. So I'm really learning nothing about this person, even though they've actually done the right thing and listed all the, to them, important details. So I would always encourage you once again to, no matter what you put on your CV, make it meaningful. Imagine you're showing this to your grandma and you need to make her understand what it is that you're doing and what you're all about. So again, I would recommend a meaningful headline, a time frame when you're talking about your studies. Let your reader know when you'll be graduating. This is important for when you are applying for working student positions, because they will want to know how much longer you will be enrolled. And it's important for when you graduate, because they will want to know when you can start working for them. And then when it comes to the descriptions, again, it's up to you what you include here. You can have an extra section for your semesters abroad, but you can also include it into this text, like in this example here. You can include a thesis project, like this person did here, but you can also just describe the project and say, well, I wrote a thesis in the area of thermoacoustics, including these and these models, or working with this and this program. So again, you need to decide what's important and relevant here. And the same, by the way, goes obviously also for when you describe work experience. Again, I would recommend a similar, well, the same type of headline, the same time of timeline, and then the same goes for descriptions. So you can explain, for instance, oh, this was a medium-sized consulting firm with these and these clients, or these and these type of projects. And then when you talk about your own tasks, make sure that, yeah, I have a description of your tasks, your responsibilities, and also your outcomes, your successes, your learnings. I would like to look at a few examples with you here. And we'll start with this one. So this person is currently, or has finished, a bachelor's degree, and I think this was their only degree, and so they spent quite a bit of time on the and also space on the description of this degree program. So this is a great example that I like to show people when they say, but I only have a bachelor's and I have nothing to write about. All right, more examples. So as you can see, this one is very different, but this is a good example of, for instance, someone doing another double degree master's program, but they found a bit of a better way to represent it. More examples. You don't need to read through those in detail. You can look at the slides provided later in your own time. I just want to show you that there are a lot of different ways of presenting your studies. You need to decide what makes the most sense for you. Moving on to examples of practical experience. So this is someone talking about their thesis project, an internship, and a working student position. And I think they did a really good job here in including the type of programming languages, for instance, they use, which is what is important and relevant to the reader here. Right, so those were a lot of examples on how to present education and practical experience, but there's obviously also a lot of other skills or experiences that you might want to talk about within your CV. So here are some examples on the slide. For instance, you can talk about further training, workshops, courses, etc., etc. I would definitely include those, but there is, of course, a difference between, you know, like a 2-hour weekend seminar and a course that you did over the course of, 6 months, and you completed an examination. So again, I would include relevant details here, a timeline, the name of the institute where you gained the qualification or where you did the course, and depending on how relevant it is, how much space you have, maybe some details about what you learned, just the content of the course, and so on and so forth. The same goes for conferences or workshops, etc., etc. You can, of course, talk about volunteering, and then skills. And I want to talk to you a little bit about skills, because what we have here is the very basic representation. So you list the type of skill, the skill, and then the level. But here's some other examples of how you can present your skills. Both of them perfectly fine. Both of them actually quite well done. If you decide to present your skills in a very graphic manner, such as in the first example, I'm very happy with that. But then again, please always remember to use graphics, symbols, colors to help your reader understand your information and not distract from it. So just including pretty bubbles and I don't know, arrows and things does not actually help. Also, please avoid including any kind of logos. Logos are mostly protected, so I would avoid putting those into personal documents. Here's another example of IT skills, a very different representation, but I think this is another one that's well done. And when it comes to skills, I really, really encourage you to think about that section as well. Most people include naturally a section on IT skills and on language or foreign language skills, but those might not actually always be the most relevant skills for you and for your industry. So here, for instance, oh no, this was another example of someone using a template, including some skills, and then that was it. And this is an example that always makes me very unhappy because, as you can see, this model doesn't actually tell me anything. And if I look at this, then I would probably think, this person hasn't actually adapted this template at all. They just typed in some words. And then it also makes me wonder, you know, perseverance 4 out of 5, what does that actually mean? And then like a huge pet peeve for me under skills in the second section at the very bottom, for instance, in the skills, it says client needs. That's not actually a skill. That's just a word. So this is an example where I can see within like immediately that this person has filled their CV, but hasn't actually thought at all about what they want to bring across with their content. So and also, by the way, soft skills don't really belong in the CV. It's something we talk about in the cover letter, which again is another reason why you should learn all about cover letter writing and how to actually make the most of that specific document. So avoid this and do this instead, where you actually thought about, oh, I am a natural scientist, I'm a biologist in this case, and IT skills and foreign language skills are fair enough, but they're not really what's relevant for me. So this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to tell my reader about my lab skills, my techniques and abilities, as well as the areas where I have in-depth knowledge in. Here's another example that actually includes soft skills also, but I think in this case it's so well done that I'm turning a little bit of a blind eye, because I think it's really, this is a really great example of someone who really thought about their expertise and what it is that they're bringing to a job and how to present that in a meaningful and actually pretty exciting way on a page. Moving on. So skills. Moving on to other extracurricular activities. As I said again, I think this is an example where, I mean, this is something like being part of a mentoring program. You can include that on the CV, but then again, think about how this will come across to your reader. So in this case, for instance, I'm not sure whether this writer participated in the program as a mentor or as a mentee. So yeah, I mean, again, make this, avoid confusing your reader even further. You want to give them answers and not have them focus in on a section of your CV that they don't understand, and then now they're confused about this program, instead of focusing on all the exciting things that you've done as part of your degree, for instance. So if you talk about your interests, your extracurricular activities, I think this, for instance, is a better way to do it. And oftentimes I get asked, you know, can I talk about my interests? Should I talk about my interests? So my advice is that if your interests are eating, sleeping, and watching movies, then maybe don't do that. But I'm sure that most of you have some kind of hobbies, interests, activities you're doing, clubs you're involved in. And if those are an important part of your personality, of who you are, then absolutely talk about it. And I think this is also a great section where if you talk about, for instance, industry trends, you're excited about industry topics, industry, maybe articles or resources that you read frequently that you're excited about, then this also gives a recruiter to talk to you about things in an interview, to ask you questions about. And believe me, they would also much rather talk about things like that than ask you about your strengths and your weaknesses, because nobody likes that question. All right, so as I said, you can mention personal interests. Very important here that in Germany, at the bottom of page 2, at the end of your CV, you should always have state the place that you're at, the date, and a scan of your handwritten signature, because this symbolizes that, you know, you that what you've put in this document is true and up to date. So I quickly want to mention a few ways in which you can further personalize your CV, in addition to obviously adapting it to the position you're applying for, adapting it to your personal profile. There's a few things you can do. For instance, you can include a personal statement like this one. This is something you can include underneath your header, for example, or on a cover page. Here's a more extensive version. So I believe that a personal statement where you summarize yourself, your skills, your main qualifications, your interests, is a great way to draw the reader's attentions towards something specific, and it especially makes sense for applicants with a very interdisciplinary profile, for instance, or a very international one, or when you're transitioning into a new field or area, simply because it allows you to draw the reader's attention towards specific things rather than leaving them alone with all your details and no framework under which to look at it. So yeah, it's a little bit, I always think a personal profile is a little bit like an introduction to a German essay, where you tell someone what they're about to experience, and it gives them this background to further understand your details and put them into perspective. Finally, an example of a one-page CV as well, because occasionally people say, oh, I have 2 pages is so much, I don't know what details to put in there. On there, I hope you're not asking yourself that question after this webinar, because you should be more worried about how to fit everything onto 2 pages. But there are a few rare instances where a one-page CV makes sense. For instance, if you're going to a career fair and you don't want to have so much paper with you, then it doesn't make sense to have everything firm and proper on one side. And also if you are applying to like the top 3 consultant companies, maybe their recruiting process tends to be very Americanized and they like to have these one-page CVs also. Again, then you have the big challenge to make things meaningful, to not leave information off, but to include them without losing any content or meaning. So I think a one-page CV is a very big challenge. And I think in Germany, at least you have 2 pages. So I highly recommend that you use those pages and fill them and make the most of them. That's it from my side. Again, I'd like to draw your attention to the application checkup online that we offer. You can upload your application documents there to receive feedback from our career counselors. You can also schedule a counseling session with a career advisor if there are any personal matters that you'd like to discuss. If you have any questions on your career path, your career planning, then absolutely do get in touch with us. There's various ways in which you can do so. We always look forward to hearing from you. And yeah, we're excited that you're here, and we wish you all the best for your career going forward.